From Toronto studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Saamiyah Syed. First, the headlines. Trump became violent when Secret Service refused to take him to Capitol Hill on January 6th. Poor People's Campaign march includes justice for Palestine. U.S. to provide $55 million to those affected by Afghanistan earthquake. Jordanian woman masters Mosaic art with no arms. Film about Muslim entertainers treads a fine line. Our top story tonight. Cassidy Hutchinson, special aide to former President Donald Trump, testified this week that Trump became violent when the Secret Service refused to take him to the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Hutchinson's testimony before the January 6th House Committee revealed Trump allegedly grabbed the wheel of his presidential limo to turn it back toward the Capitol riot. The head of the president's Secret Service detail then grabbed Trump's hand from the wheel. Trump then allegedly choked the throat and clavicle of his lead Secret Service agent. Hutchinson said Trump wanted all metal detectors taken down at his speech on January 6th so his supporters could keep their weapons, according to testimony. Trump's White House lawyer then warned that he is going to be charged with every crime imaginable, which the president ignored, according to testimony. Facebook and Instagram have been removing posts informing people they can obtain federally approved abortion pills through the mail, according to Motherboard. The move comes after the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the landmark abortion rights ruling Roe v. Wade last Friday. Meanwhile, the platforms have ignored posts offering to mail guns, Motherboard reports. An Associated Press reporter's Facebook post offering to mail abortion pills was removed within a minute Monday, according to the news outlet. When the reporter swapped out the words abortion pills for a gun, the post remained untouched, AP reported Tuesday. A coalition of social justice and human rights groups from all 50 states marched on June 18th in Washington, D.C. to demand justice. Led by the Reverend Dr. William Barber II, the Poor People's Campaign took its message that everybody's got a right to live to Congress. Thousands gathered calling for a shift from investment in weaponized policing, a war-first foreign policy, and mass incarceration. Representatives from groups like Jewish Voice for Peace, the American Friends Service Committee, and the Quaker Palestine-Israel Network were among the marchers. Their signs featured slogans like "Support Palestinian Resistance to Israeli Ethnic Cleansing." These groups believe that the message of the Poor People's Campaign must include addressing the militarized U.S. policy in Israel-Palestine. They also call for the right of Palestinian return and reparations for the original ethnic cleansing of more than 750,000 Palestinians that took place in 1948. The U.S. will provide nearly $55 million in aid to those affected by last week's earthquake in eastern Afghanistan, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Tuesday. The 6.1 magnitude earthquake has killed 1,150 people and wounded more than 1,600 others. The additional disaster relief will go through the U.S. Agency for International Development, Blinken said. He added the new funding brings the total U.S. humanitarian aid to more than $774 million in the last year. Blinken said they will receive help with water, sanitation, and hygiene supplies to prevent waterborne disease outbreak. But Blinken did not speak of the billions of U.S. dollars in Afghan central bank reserves that remain frozen overseas, which the American government refuses to release. This, along with sanctions, which were both imposed after the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan last August, are crippling the country's banking sector and economy. Reuters reports that the sanctions are being used by Western countries to push for concessions on human rights from the Taliban. On Monday, the U.S. military said it carried out a strike targeting a senior leader of an Al-Qaeda-linked group in Syria. U.S. Central Command Forces, or CENTCOM, said it targeted Abu Hamza al-Yemeni, a senior leader of Hurras al-Din, an al-Qaeda-aligned terrorist organization. Al-Yemeni was traveling alone on a motorcycle at the time of the strike in Idlib province, according to the statement. No civilian casualties occurred during the strike, CENTCOM said. It also said extremist groups, including al-Qaeda-aligned organizations such as Hurras al-Din, continue to present a threat to America and its allies. CENTCOM added that Al-Qaeda-aligned militants use Syria as a safe haven to coordinate with external affiliates and plan operations outside of Syria. On Tuesday, an Egyptian criminal court sentenced 10 members of the Muslim Brotherhood to death for carrying out attacks against police and facilities. The court also sentenced in absentia Yahya Musa, a leader in the Muslim Brotherhood, according to the Egyptian state news agency. The men, part of the Helwan brigades, were found guilty of killing policemen, sabotage, violence, and use of force, according to the court. Per Egyptian law, all sentences of the Emergency Supreme State Security Criminal Court are final. However, President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has the power to reduce sentences or abolish them. Authorities have persecuted Muslim Brotherhood members and leaders for decades. They have also outlawed the group after the ouster of former President Mohamed Morsi in 2013, who served as the country's first democratically elected leader. Morsi died in prison in 2019 after being overthrown by the military. On Monday, rights groups warned that the Israeli government's move to register ownership of land next to Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied East Jerusalem could enable a takeover. It ultimately will lead to further Palestinian dispossession, according to a joint statement by Israeli rights groups Iramim and Bimcom. Israel's Justice Ministry last week began a settlement of land title procedure in Abu Tor area on the Umayyad Palace's site next to the southern wall of Al-Aqsa Mosque. It is using a government fund allocated to reduce socioeconomic gaps and create a better future for Palestinians in the city. The fund has largely been used to register land for illegal settlements. Jordanian woman masters mosaic art with no arms comes right after the break, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Mr. Speaker, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or a burqa, does that mean that it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearance? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban, or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. So rather than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks? Racist remarks, Mr. Speaker, which have led to a spike in hate crime. And given the increasing prevalence of such incidents within his party, when will the Prime Minister finally order an inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, something which he and his Chancellor promised on national television?
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Sound Vision has a summer plan for your kids. Keep them busy and having fun. With creative teaching methods, songs, stories, art projects, and more. Amazing teachers and role models. Lessons that build love for Allah. Positive identity as a Muslim. Summer fun has just begun. Learn about animals in the Quran. Arabic vocabulary. Beautiful names of Allah. Science in the Quran. Visit distant Muslim lands. Learn fun facts about the country, the people, and how to cook special dishes, all from the safety and convenience of your home. Visit academy.adamsworld.org for more details. Hurry, classes start on July 4th.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. Jordanian Rahma Khairullah's Mosaic art conveys an inspiring message of hope despite living with a rare condition. The 36-year-old was born without arms and depends on her feet for everything. She sought to be an active member of society and resorted to mosaic art to create paintings. Anadolu Agency visited Khairullah at the Mosaic House for Crafts and Handicrafts in Madaba province, where she told her inspiring story. Khairullah was born in the Shafa Badran section of the capital, Amman, in 1986. Khairullah said her mother taught her to use her feet and would give her things to put between her fingers and watched her from afar. Eventually, she joined a special center for mobility disabilities. In 2013, Khairullah enrolled in a 13-day mosaic art course where her love for the art form began. On Monday, Muslim members of Uganda's parliament condemned the government, accusing it of carrying out witch hunts against Muslims when rebel activity occurs. They said the government is quick to point fingers at Muslims if acts of terrorism take place in the country. Police said they carried out operations in Luwero district in central Uganda, where they arrested 60 Muslims, including women and children. Police claimed those detained were being recruited and trained in rebel activities. Luwero resident district commissioner Richard Babe said the people arrested were being taught how to carry out terrorist acts. Muslim lawmaker Aisha Kabanda, speaking on behalf of Muslim parliamentarians, criticized the government for labeling those arrested for terrorist activities as Muslim. The Balance, a film about Muslim entertainers and the expanding Islamic entertainment industry, will be released on July 1st. The title refers to the line, "Faith-based artists must walk with respect to practicing art amid religious strictures." British filmmaker Abrar Hussein's documentary delves into such spiritual predicaments. It explores Muslim music, film, social media, and comedy. The Balance opens with eulogies to popular South African Muslim missionary Ahmed Deedat and boxing world champion Muhammad Ali. The film is vague on how they relate to a wider industry, according to a review. Critics say The Balance slips too easily into a montage and generalities and overlooks the contributions of Muslims outside of the Western world. In the film, Hussein claims that there is no Islamic entertainment industry until 20 years ago, but he does not mention the Egyptian, Afghan, Iranian, Lebanese, and Turkish cinema and music industries. The Oman-based Islamic banking service Ahli Islamic has launched a new digital platform for corporate customers. Known as Islaminet, it is one of the bank's many digital initiatives. Yusuf Al-Rawahi, head of Ahli Islamic, said Islaminet is a bilingual online portal that offers Islamic corporate internet banking. Ahli Islamic's overall goal is to create an innovative banking solutions for the future. More information has been revealed about the Saudi government's hiring of a company linked to the BJP-ruled Indian government to process Hajj applications for Western countries. Saudi authorities have contracted with TravEasy, a Dubai-based company, to facilitate applications from the US, Australia, and Europe to Mutawif. Middle East Eye reports that the company has links to India's ruling BJP government. TravEasy has received substantial investments from Excel India, a venture capital firm whose vice president Prashant Prakash is believed to be a key BJP ally, it said. After this was discovered, subsequent reports claim the company has changed its leadership profile to mask Hindu names from its website. Coming up after our break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Mr. Speaker, if I decide to wear a turban, or you decide to wear a cross, or he decides to wear a kippah or a skull cap, or she decides to wear a hijab or a burqa, does that mean that it is open season for right honourable members of this House to make derogatory and divisive remarks about our appearance? For those of us who from a young age have had to endure and face up to being called names such as Towelhead or Taliban or coming from Bongo land, we can appreciate full well the hurt and pain felt by already vulnerable Muslim women when they are described as looking like bank robbers and letterboxes. So rather than hide behind sham and whitewash investigations, when will the Prime Minister finally apologise for his derogatory and racist remarks which... Racist remarks, Mr. Speaker, which have led to a spike in hate crime. And given the increasing prevalence of such incidents within his party, when will the Prime Minister finally order an inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party, something which he and his Chancellor promised on national television?
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Dad, they took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
Welcome back. To discuss the developments during the NATO summit in Madrid, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Saamiyah. Russian invasion of Ukraine is changing a whole lot of things. Among them is strengthening NATO. We have Professor David Gibbs professor of history at the University of Arizona. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you for having me on.
Professor, has NATO becoming more and more relevant thanks to Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Well, I don't think that's the only factor, but there's no doubt the Russian invasion of Ukraine has strengthened NATO. That was the triggering mechanism that has brought Sweden and Finland to the brink of NATO membership, breaking with their longstanding history of neutrality. This isn't really, there aren't really such large countries. They don't make that much difference militarily, but it's symbolically significant in that these two countries have really stood out as almost symbols of neutralism during the Cold War. Throughout the Cold War, they were neutral. And into the post-Cold War period, they remained neutral, and now they're breaking with that tendency. And it does underscore how, at least for the moment, the war in the Ukraine clearly has strengthened NATO, yes.
You mentioned this is the triggering thing, but there are other factors. What are the other factors?
Well, it's there's always been, particularly in Sweden, an element of the military and security establishment that has long favored Swedish, at least, association with NATO rather than neutrality. It's to some extent an ideological split in Sweden, with the left being more inclined to neutralism, the right, the militarist right, more inclined to joining NATO. At least in the past, that was the breakdown. With the end of the Cold War, Sweden, not so much Finland, but Sweden began sort of gradually setting aside its neutralism and becoming a NATO member in all but name. Sweden participated in various ways in the U.S. occupation, the disastrous U.S. occupation of Afghanistan. It participated in the overthrow of Gaddafi, again, a disaster. Honestly, one might question the logic of this because Sweden's past engagement with NATO have been in projects that have gone very badly indeed. But nevertheless, one sees these as precursors to what they're doing now. The current Swedish bid for membership didn't come out of nowhere. Clearly, it was building up over many years. And with the end of the Cold War, it seems the ending of the Cold War was a significant factor that caused at least Sweden to rethink its neutralism policy. They weren't the only ones. Of course, France had a long tradition under Charles de Gaulle of having an independent foreign policy and remaining outside NATO's joint military command. They ended that. They joined NATO. They're full NATO members now. So NATO has been strengthening over time, and clearly the recent events have dramatically strengthened its unity, at least for the moment. Whether that lasts or not is another matter.
Now, the world, I remember sitting in the Council on Foreign Relations where Hillary Clinton was speaking, saying we are no longer a unipolar world and things like that. But military alliance seems to be the only play in the world arena. So how, while the world overall, other powers are rising, there is no balance in terms of military alliances to counter or balance NATO.
To some extent, I think that luckily of the rise of China, and China now has eclipsed the United States in terms of production. As an economic power, China is at least a larger producer and certainly larger exporter than the United States. And that disparity will certainly grow over time. And, China has been building up their military, although they're nowhere near militarily as powerful as the United States. They don't even come close. And Russia is just 1/12 of what America spends on military equipment. Nevertheless, I think America has been looking at, I don't know how conscious this was, but certainly when one looks at the post-Cold War period, one has a sense the United States missed the Cold War. They missed having an enemy to justify hundreds of overseas bases and missed having an enemy to justify NATO. And it was almost as if America was looking for enemies. And if you're looking for enemies, you will find them. I don't really think that it was necessary to really have this kind of new Cold War America is now having with both Russia and China. But the United States seems to have, I sense a certain amount of relief, even glee, among American foreign policy making elites in terms of what is going on now in Ukraine, in that it is a justification for NATO and is a justification for American power. And while publicly there's some lamenting about the massive loss of life that is going on and the suffering that is being caused by the economic fallout from the war, there's also a sense of triumphalism that this strengthens America's hand and strengthens NATO's hand. And so I think on the whole, American foreign policy elites see the war in Ukraine as being more of a positive than a negative.
But don't you think that we're not going in full-fledged war with Russia to avoid the nuclear conflict, and we're giving something to Ukraine to fight with? Don't you think the real victim are going to be people of Ukraine, loss of life, loss of property, and they seems to be in it for a long period of time?
Well, there are two ways to look at that. The current position of people like Zelensky, apparently backed by a sizable portion, possibly an overwhelming majority of his population, is that they're so angry at the Russian invasion, they don't want to make any concessions at all, want to defeat Russia on the battlefield, and believe, however implausible in my view, that that's a reasonably achievable objective. The alternative view is that, which I would favor, is that inevitably there is no way Russia is going to lose this war. I don't see any plausible scenario where that's going to happen. And that inevitably there's going to be some kind of partition of Ukraine. I think that's very tragic, and I think partitions are bad things. And I think it was even more tragic because it was avoidable. But all the same, I don't see any way around partition at this point in time. If I'm correct in my assumption, as I believe I am, then the sooner this war is ended, the better for the people of Ukraine, even though they don't see it that way. So I suppose I would question the judgment of people like Zelensky, even though I understand their anger at what is going on.
Do you think Russia will be satisfied by just getting a pie of the Ukraine?
I think as I read it, Russia's objectives were more defensive, really, in the sense that Ukraine is on their borders. And again, as an American citizen who studied U.S. relations with Latin America, I know how very sensitive the U.S. has always been about the issue of foreign involvement in the Western Hemisphere. And there's no question in my mind that if Russia or China were to try and establish bases in Mexico, there's absolutely no doubt the U.S. would have been prepared to use military force. So, I don't think it's surprising that Russia's acting this way, even though it's clearly an illegal and brutal act. And I think any reasonable person would have to condemn it on both moral and legal grounds. Nevertheless, it is one the U.S. should understand, because all the history of U.S. relations with Latin America suggests the U.S. would have done pretty much the same thing in a similar situation.
Turkey was saying that we are not going to allow Finland and Sweden to join because they are supporting Kurdish terrorists in their vocabulary or separatist. Suddenly they have dropped their objection, and these countries are being asked to apply. Why Turkey dropped its opposition? What did they gain from it?
Well, I don't have enough information. My guess would be that they wanted some kind of concession, and they probably got some informal concession from the U.S. and from European countries, in the sense that there was a dispute between the United States and Turkey over Turkey's purchase of a Russian anti-aircraft system. And the United States was trying to maybe block arms purchases from other NATO states based upon anger at Turkey's willingness to purchase something from the Russians. And so I think the Turks wanted an assurance that they're not going to be blocked from further military purchases in the future. I'm assuming, that's just a guess. And they raised this objection to NATO enlargement as a way of achieving an informal assurance that the United States would drop its feud over the Russian anti-aircraft system. I assume they probably got what they wanted. And, things will now return as planned, the enlargement will take place. That's just speculation on my part. It didn't seem Turkey was that serious in objecting to the accession to membership of Sweden and Finland. I always assumed it was some sort of a gambit by Erdogan to gain some advantage. And I assume he got the advantage and he's going along with the project.
There is another thing happening called BRICS, in which Russia and China are involved. And Iran says that we have applied for the membership there. Do you see BRICS developing, which is more like economic type of arrangement, developing in some sort of counterbalance to the Western alliances?
Well, at the moment, certainly the BRICS countries do seem to be playing that role, in that China is informally acting almost as an ally of Russia. India, all the BRICS nations have refused to participate in the economic sanctions against Russia, all of them. And all of them are perfectly willing to purchase Russian products, including Russian energy products. India especially is making massive purchases of Russian oil at great advantage to themselves, clearly. And so it is very striking. The United States tried to pressure, one might say, bully India into backing down on this, and India just laughed at the United States, basically, and went ahead anyway, underscoring the limits of American power. The United States, as powerful as it is, sometimes underestimates how much deference other countries are willing to give to them. And in this case, India didn't go along with it. Iran, clearly has been a pariah state made that way by the United States. I think partly because America will never forgive the Iranians for overthrowing the Shah of Iran in the 70s, America's greatest ally in the Gulf, at least equal to Israel. And they'll never forgive the Iranians also for seizing the American embassy, the hostage crisis. And even though that was more than 40 years ago, that still seems to be a kind of almost an American vendetta against Iran. Iran is trying to naturally escape from American pressure. And by aligning with a powerful group like the BRICS, that's how Iran sees as a way of getting around American pressure and escaping, or at least reducing, the impact of American sanctions. And so, one of the things you've had here is at one point, on the one hand, you have an extraordinary solidarity and solidity of the United States and its allies, not just in NATO, but also in Asia, Japan, South Korea, have been extraordinarily supportive of the United States in this issue. Outside of the American alliance system, the rest of the world has overwhelmingly viewed this very differently and seen this in more complex terms. And on the one hand, I think the view in a place like, let us say, India or Indonesia is, on the one hand, nobody's really supporting the invasion of Ukraine, because that was just so obviously an outrageous thing to do. On the other hand, the United States itself has, of course, often invaded countries. Look at the invasion of Iraq, the invasion of Afghanistan, the overthrow of Gaddafi. And so, the position, I think, in the global South is that the United States has no legitimate claim of moral superiority here. And that the moral self-righteousness with which America has become accustomed to acting on is unjustified. So I think you're having kind of a bifurcation of the world in terms of, the northern hemisphere of America's allies versus the global South. And we're seeing that very dramatically in the response to the Ukraine war.
Well, thank you so much, Professor David Gibbs, for your time. Back to you, Saamiyah.
Thank you so much, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Toronto studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.